Coach, how's it going?
How we doing? We're excited to hang out and talk some football today, Mario. That's for sure.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, excited to have you on. Appreciate you making some time, especially as the head ball coach, middle of spring. I know how crazy it can get between wrapping up spring ball and rolling right into recruiting and all that good stuff. So, once again, thanks for the time. So, let's dive on in here. What got you into coaching? What got you into this profession? Who are some of the guys that maybe pushed you into being in this great game?
I mean, I appreciate the opportunity, because these are things that, I don't get a chance to talk about too much, unless I get a new young coach on my boat and he gets me talking a little bit about my past. But, I think we're all products of our environment in coaching and education. And for me, it started relatively early in high school. I played 3 sports and my coaches all coached all 3 sports together, and our head football coach was the head wrestling coach and the offensive coordinator was the head lacrosse coach, and my line coach coached track. And, back at Rush Henrietta, Jerry Everling was our head coach, and, quite a guy to be around. I mean, he was an All-American wrestler at Syracuse and was on their first Sugar Bowl team as a football player. And at one point was head coach at Union College back in the day. And those guys they enjoyed coaching. They enjoyed teaching. They enjoyed spending time together outside of coaching. They were always telling hunting and fishing stories. And I just loved hanging out in their office with them, and I thought, man, these guys don't even work. This definitely could be, a career path for me, and as I kind of, followed in those guys' footsteps in the path I took. So they definitely had a huge influence on me. Jim Cox, Coach Young, just some great coaches.
That's awesome. And so obviously you spend your time there, you're watching them, you're doing a great job as a student athlete, and you get the opportunity to go play ball at Ithaca. As you go through your time there, you are fortunate enough to win a national championship. Basically, while you're going through that process, are you knowing you want to coach? Are you going to go get that kinesiology or whatever major? Was that kind of the track that you were on?
The education part's a funny path because, I thought I was going to be an engineer. I tell the story all the time. I did really well in high school physics. College physics just kicked my rear end. My high school coaches kind of steered me away from phys ed because I thought at that time it would be hard for me to get a job.
Yeah.
And so I was a pretty strong student. So I actually majored in biology education.
Oh, wow.
And at that time had a coaching minor. And, not only did I get to play for Jim Butterfield and guys like Mike Welch, who was there at the time as an assistant and was his successor at Ithaca, and Coach Welch recruited me out of high school, but I got to take like Coach Butterfield's coaching class, and which is quite an experience. I'll never forget, Coach Butts, my assignment for my paper was the wing T. And he said if I dared say that it started in Maine, he would give me an F. Excuse me, in Delaware. I misspoke. In Delaware, because everyone thinks it started in Delaware. And he's a University of Maine grad. He said the wing T started in Maine, Blaise, And he actually was one of the few people who called me Blaise in his thick Maine accent. Blaise, the wing T started in Maine, not in Delaware, And, I literally have things in my coaching philosophy that I took, Coach Butts' class in college, and he was really appreciative to be there during Ithaca, 7 national championships. Coach Butterfield won 3. I was fortunate to participate in the 91 game, and that was back, Mario, when there was only one ESPN, man. Okay, no, we played on a Saturday at 1, which is wild, and like Dr. Jerry Punch was calling the game with Gary Danielson, and we played Dayton, and certainly like a highlight of my time in my education. Playing for Coach Butterfield and Coach Welch and Coach Faulkner and that coaching staff. And certainly that solidified that I was going to keep being a part of football one way or another, whether it was high school or college, for sure.
Well, the hard part, at least when I'm talking to young coaches who are maybe trying to break ground into the profession, especially at the collegiate level, is the first gig. So you finish up your playing career in 92, 93 year, you're coaching at Albany. How did you, just walk us through that process. How do you apply? Right. Who hooked you up? The interview process, whatever. How did you get your first gig?
I tell my grad assistants at Utica this all the time, this story. So I walk into Coach Butterfield's office, and, what's next, right? So I'm telling him how I want to go to Syracuse or Penn State. And this is back when the GAs just made coffee and held the dummies, right? They weren't really coaching anything.
Right.
And he's like, no, you're not. You're not going to do that. And then I told him I was going to get into Ithaca's phys ed program and their master's program, and I wanted to stay. And he told me, no, you're not going to do that either. So, okay. All right, so what do you think I should do? And he's like, you have my recommendation. You know how we do things here at Ithaca. You need to go on and learn from some other folks. And he just recommended Don Miller at Trinity and Bob Ford at Albany. And he wasn't asking either. This is what you're going to do. There's openings at both places. I applied for both, interviewed for both. You talk about crossroads, and certainly I was very fortunate. I was offered both positions. Both were just, outstanding men. I had dinner with Don Miller at a Sizzler in Connecticut back in the day in Hartford, and just a great guy. But I was so glad I decided to go to UAlbany and follow guys like Coach Welch, who was at Albany GA, Mark McQuaid, who's still out there coaching high school ball now. And then, didn't really realize what I was getting into as far as the coaching tree at UAlbany, which was just unbelievable. And guys like Tony Wise and Dave Campo coaching in the NFL, and Coach Sidlecki's the head coach at Yale. Just some Coach Bagnoli was the head coach at Union at the time. So all of these, the list goes on and on of the coaches that got to be under Bob Ford. So that was just a great 2-year stop for me. So I was very fortunate to go from undergrad, where again I played D-line. So I really didn't know a lot about X's and O's, but I like to think I knew how to recruit and I knew how to motivate, based upon my experience at Ithaca. And just had a great 2 years there at Albany. Most importantly, met my wife, Allison, one night downtown Albany. But that was the best part of my 2 years there. But that was a great experience for me.
Absolutely. Now, let me ask you this. You said something I was actually going to ask anyways. You said I played D-line. I didn't really know X's and O's like that. And I think a lot of guys, I know I want to coach for a long time. My brother's a head high school coach here in Texas now, so he's 4 years older than me, so I was always keeping up with him from a knowledge base. And so when I walked out of college, probably arrogantly, I thought I knew a lot more than what I did. When you got into that interview process, how much of it was X's and O's? I like I said, I know the GA job was a little bit different, but wasn't that interview process where you kind of like, man, I really don't know this. Am I prepared for this?
This was a unique interview at Albany. Like he would interview like 40 guys like over 3 days, and there was like stations. So there was like 6 of us in the front of the room, and they're peppering us with questions, and then we would go like on stations. So it was pretty intense. Wow. And Coach Ford was really adamant, which is interesting. Like he's like, no, you're going to coach offense. I know you play defense. You're going to coach offense. So I knew I was interviewing for offensive line. Okay. And so for me, all right, what's my strength? I didn't get on the board at all. I literally grabbed some chairs and talked through base block and double team and how I would coach that. And, was fortunate that through that pretty intense process, they saw something in me, some potential in me as a young coach. Because it was probably back then we had 8 grad assistants that lived in a house right around the corner from the university. And, it was pretty wild, and just really learned about the profession of the game, from Coach Ford. And like when we go to clinics, man, there was like purple gear everywhere, Great Danes gear everywhere. And we would go to all the Glacier clinics together, and we'd work all the camps in the summer together. And just, he was really, persistent on, hey, learning more and more about the game. And I'll never forget my first camp. I actually drove Bob Ford to Long Island to work an offense-defense camp, and I'd never worked a football camp, and so many things I learned in the profession, from Coach Ford. So, I learned the freeze option offense. We kind of were copying Syracuse at the time. Yeah. And our offensive coordinator was Ed Zaloom, and I was the assistant to the assistant offensive line coach. So Coach Zaloom ended up being the head coach for a period of time after he left Albany. And this name you might know in college football, Pete Lembo, very successful college coach. Yeah. He was the second offensive line coach, and I was there. I was the freshman line coach, right? that was my first gig, which I look back on. We had some great times at UAlbany. And that was back when UAlbany was Division III.
Absolutely. So. What I always love about hearing coaches, that are seasoned like yourself, go back and talk about these stories when they start talking about some of these staffs. I mean, a D3 staff with Pete Limbo. I don't know where he is right now, but I know he's one of the best special teams guys in the business for sure.
Yeah,
Campo at one time was one of the best special teams guys in the league, and just crazy staff you had the opportunity to kind of be around as a young guy, not knowing that these guys would go on to be so successful. That's awesome. Now, you had the opportunity to come back to your alma mater, which is always interesting. Once again, I think the process kind of in between the transition of jobs, you met your wife, you had an awesome time, probably made the biggest leap in growth in the profession, in those early years. It's so much knowledge to be gained. What let you know you were ready to be back? Who'd you call? How did you end up back at your alma mater?
Again, another crossroads. I met my soon-to-be fiance,
right.
Allison, and I applied for everything, Mario. I applied for college jobs, I applied for high school jobs, and there was nothing. Like, I had nothing. I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do next? And I actually had interviewed for a biology high school job in Gilderland High School. I didn't get the job, so I'm like, what am I going to do? And my defensive line coach at Ithaca, another coach that had a huge impact on me, Tom Pollockay. Now, Coach Pollockay, to give you an idea on him, he was, I think, to this day, the only soloed captain at Ithaca. All right, this guy was a badass, right? Let's just call it how it is. And just a great coach. So he had stepped away from coaching, was going to focus on his son who was coming up through the ranks. And so Coach Welch, who became the head coach, after Coach Butterfield, and just a big mentor of mine. And Coach called me up and offered me to be the D-line coach at Ithaca, right, for $2,600. And, hey, I'll get you a job subbing. So my girlfriend at the time, her family thinks I'm out of my mind. What do you mean you're taking a job for $2,600 and you're going to go sub? And that's, I'll figure it out. And, God bless my wife. She's like, well, you're not going without me, and so she got a teaching job about 45 minutes from Ithaca. And I did. I substitute taught for a while. I coached some high school lacrosse. I coached some high school softball, and pretty much subbed for a year until there was a local high school where I got the biology job. So I didn't have to be too poor for too long with the support of my girlfriend at the time, and then it was crazy because then I got the biology job at the school I was subbing. So for 3 years, I taught high school biology at Spencer Vanetten, and I drive 30 minutes up to practice at Ithaca and coached, with a great group of guys. Like that staff that Coach Welch put together. Bill George was the longtime head coach of Coast Guard. One of his coordinators, Ray LaFord, was there. And then a dear friend of mine to this day, Brian Angelico, was on that staff. And Brian, most recently, was like passing game coordinator for the Vikings, and as a local guy, right? So we just had a lot of fun there. And so for 4 years, I was the part-time guy. One of the things I think that has helped me as a head coach is all the different roles on my staff I've been. I've been the part-time guy, I've been the GA, I've been the full-time assistant. And I think that's helped me appreciate, the different roles that my staff has, at a Division III program.
Yeah. It's interesting. I get calls often about, guys wanting to make the transitions I mentioned earlier. And oftentimes, it might be a Texas high school football coach that wants to coach collegiate. And there's a good opportunity, there's a good chance that you might have to take a significant pay cut just to get your foot through the door. And obviously, you talked about taking that gig for $2,600 and just making it work, and just making it work. And then if all the pieces kind of laid, and you're a part-time guy, but you're able to, with the help of your wife, figure it all out. I think that's always interesting, and I think that's just a unique perspective. There's more of those type of jobs in the country than there are, the $100,000 jobs where
you can get benefits and get your teeth cleaned and get a physical.
Absolutely.
Right. There aren't many of those either.
yeah, no doubt. And so I love the perspective, just figuring it out, and obviously that pays dividends because soon enough you get your first full-time job after about 7 years of GA and then been a part-time assistant. Obviously learning a ton of great ball in the meantime, but you go get a defensive coordinator job at St. John Fisher, excuse me. Once again, I am just always intrigued, especially guys that end up being head coaches. Just a little bit about the interview process, how you saw it. Yeah. Once again, how did that opportunity come about, and how hard was it for you to leave your alma mater?
That's a crazy story. So, So, twice while I'm at Ithaca part-time, I interviewed to be a full-time coach at Ithaca and didn't get the job. But again, there were guys that were much more experienced than me.
Yeah.
Eric Jackson came over from Cornell, dear friend of mine, so it was tough, and and I had learned, now I started really learning football. So Ray LaFord, who came from a GA at East Carolina, I learned so much, football from him. And there's things that we still do on offense and defense to this day that I learned from Ray back then. So now here I go, Bomber Blue, and like, it's so funny. Like, you talk to those guys, man, they're Bombers forever,
Yeah.
And so like that feeling that I have, like, man, if I'm ever head coach, I want my program to have that same feeling, right? So I'm started applying for full-time jobs and kind of make the decision with Allison. And, this time now we've gotten married. And she, am I going to be a head high school coach and teach or college? So I'm making, now that I'm teaching, I'm probably making 40. Allison is still making more than me. We laugh about this. She made more than me for most of our marriage, right?
Yeah.
So the Fisher job comes in, it's $26,000. So I take another huge pay cut,
Right,
making 40 to then be a full-time coach, back in my home area of Rochester where I grew up, and was dear friends with some of the guys on the staff at Fisher. Gary Mervis, who runs Camp Good Days and Special Times in the Finger Lakes, was the kicking coach. Good friends of my family. Buddy Sims, who is like a legend in college football, and is dear friends of my high school coach. I didn't know Coach Vosberg as well, and it didn't take me long to get to know him. Just a tremendous person, and gave me my first full-time job. And again, so what did Coach Vosberg say to me? He's like, "You're going to coach the secondary." I said, "What?" I don't know a half from a third from a. He's like, "Listen, I have a veteran group. This is going to help you professionally." I want to. At that time, he was focusing on offense, and he was a secondary guy himself. And again, that was one of the best things that could have happened to me. Is the 3 years I spent, even though they were pretty tough years as we were building it at Fisher, I was coaching the secondary. And then all of a sudden, we made a shift on the staff, and Coach Sims went from defense to coaching the O-line. Coach Vosberg came back and coached the secondary, and then I got to go back and coach the D-line, which I've always loved coaching, and then be the defensive coordinator. So, the Fisher stop, I was there for 9 years.
Yeah.
I'm not a head coach if I don't go to St. John Fisher. Like, how do you go from like 1-9 to then, 6 years later playing Mount Union in the Final Four, right?
Yeah.
And like, it didn't happen overnight. And there were other job opportunities that came along, outside of football. And again, my wife's family thinks I'm crazy, and I'm telling them, be patient. We're going to win at Fisher. Everyone says now, it's kind of, I like how people say, be where your feet are.
Yeah.
That wasn't like a saying back then, but I learned that really early in my profession. Like, my first convention was Tom Osborne at the Master Coaches with Joe Paterno. Like, two legends that were at their places, and like, they were their place.
Yeah.
Right. And they told them, hey, you young guys, stop bouncing around, right? Be where you are, give that place everything you have, and that will lead to your next job. So I'm really appreciative of, those years at Fisher for sure.
Well, obviously that's a tremendous place to kind of go and turn that program around. I would most likely just guess that is huge part of you getting that head job at Utica. Well, I guess you can kind of mention that. Now, one thing I just wanted to, before we go to Utica, it seems like, pretty much from the time you started up until this point, up to the point you're at St. John Fisher and you get the D-line job, you're out of your comfort zone for a long time. Whether it's you're coaching D-line, you maybe not making the amount of money to be comfortable, or you're making good money, but you're coaching defensive backs. How important was that for you, those experiences, to maybe get outside of your comfort zone a little bit? Number one, financially. Number two, from a positional standpoint, just coaching the different positions and having to learn and be your best self for these young people.
Again, I just trusted my mentors, and there was a time where, I was back to Ithaca Fisher transition. So I was passed up twice, but then literally a month after I get the Fisher job, right, and Coach Welch is excited for me, Billy George and Ray leave to go to Coast Guard. So there was a chance I could have stayed. So that was a huge one. Like, man, do I stay at Ithaca, my alma mater that I love, or do I go and take this chance at Fisher? And I really don't believe I'm where I am today if I don't, sometimes you have to take some risks and take some chances. And
Yeah,
I think in many of my stops, everyone's like, "You're like, why do you do that? Why wouldn't you stay at Ithaca? You're
Right.
winning, right? But I think it was kind of when I thought back to what Coach Butterfield told me, back when he's like, you have my recommendation. And, Coach Vosberg gave me that chance to be a full-time coach. I wasn't going to renege on that. I'd already made that commitment.
Yeah.
I was excited to kind of go back home a little bit. I'm originally from Rochester. And I said, well, you know what? If we can get it going at St. John Fisher, that would be something special, and I think of all the recruits and, it's always the guys that come when you're 3-7 that you're closest to. It's always easy to show up after,
No
you're
doubt.
10-2, and it's always a little easier to recruit. But all the Fisher guys that came and believed in Coach Vosberg and myself and the staff, that, hey, we had an awesome president, Dr. Catherine Keough. She's an amazing woman that really kind of transformed the whole place at Fisher. But yeah, just the whole, now again, there's a saying now, to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Yeah, I didn't know that saying back then, but you certainly bring up a good point. Like I certainly just kind of threw myself into those things, and again, Coach Sims pretty much knows everyone in football. So I'm driving out to Buffalo to meet with Coach Zabo, right? Like who's coaching for the Bills, to talk about like zone blitz coverage. So like I would just get in my car and go and just talk football with people. And the best thing that Coach Vosberg always did is that he always made me like, all right, if we're going to run cover 4, you better show me and how we're going to run it to everything. And like, he really made me get on the board and do that, and hold me accountable to the things that we're going to do defensively.
That's awesome. Well, once again, being uncomfortable, I don't care who you are. The first time getting a head gig, there's probably a little bit of, butterflies in the stomach. So how did the Utica opportunity present itself? How did you end up being the guy? And, what were some of those, it's easy to talk about the good things you did in the first couple of years. What were some of the hard things that maybe you had to learn the first year being a head ball coach, first couple of years?
Well, I think, it's funny. I'm at Fisher. I'm there a while, and so I think it was years, 5 or 6 we started winning.
Yeah.
And then it's more of like my friends in the profession. You got to start applying for head jobs. It's like, I want to keep winning it.
Yeah.
I want to win the Umpire 8 at Fisher. We want to win a national championship, which we were one game away from. And, one of the things that's wild is, while we were in Rochester, I have to bring up, and my son always he's like, why you always talk about this? But like, so we adopted our son, James, while we're getting ready to play Mount Union in the semifinals. Like we adopted James from Guatemala, and we visited him in August before training camp, and we knew the call could come at any time. So this is a wild story that I got to share with my Fisher family of guys. And like, they all remember me getting on the plane on a Monday. And then Mike Fox, who's the defense coordinator at Brockport, he's running practice all week as a defensive intern with Coach Vosberg, because I wasn't at practice because we were in Guatemala bringing our son home, which was like a crazy thing that occurred.
Wow.
So like, we get back on Friday night at midnight. Jeff Harrison, Sean Reardon, and Kevin Moravik are in a rental car, and we drive from Rochester to Alliance, Ohio, through the middle of the night. Right, like I get an hour's sleep in the hotel. Coach Vosberg used to let me do the team prayer. Get an hour in the hotel, did the team prayer, and what now? I tell you what, we gave him everything we had. Pierre Garçon's playing, and we lost by 12. It was a great game.
Yeah,
and so like I became so close with the people there. Like,
yeah,
it was like hard to go, and what people say, if you put everything into a place, it's never going to be easy to go.
absolutely.
Right? It was hard to leave Ithaca. It was even harder to leave Fisher because of what we had built there. But the funny thing was that, when the Utica opportunity came open, it was another one of those ones where on the outside looking in, it may not have been a no-brainer, right? It was tough. Coach Kemp, who I'm good friends with to this day, he's speaking at our clinic here in May. It was tough. Mike got let go. They had an intern guy. There was some strife on the team. The defense was practicing at a different time, and the offense was like, it didn't look really, really good. But what's funny was all of my parents and those relationships that I built that were from Utica, whose kids went to Fisher and Ithaca, my phone's ringing off the hook. And like, they're like, Blaise, this is the diamond in the rough, and all he needs is a different direction, and really could be a really strong program. And we laugh about it. I've probably been having Venice Pizza I've been the head coach. This will be my 16th year, but I've probably been having Venice Pizza for 25 years because I used to recruit Utica.
Oh yeah.
Right. So I would out here buying my wife's Christmas presents at Fingertown Square Mall, and I tell you, one of the funnier things I heard Gerbino say to me, and you guys did a great job. I love his podcast you guys did with Joe. I think of him, as he's as a younger brother, he's just the best. Is that, Coach, if there was a job in the country that was made for you, it's Utica, New York. There's like all those Italians in Utica and all the food and everything that's going on there. And again, you wouldn't have known that right away, right? It was a lot of hard work to get our program to where we've been recently. But it literally was all of the parents and the people that I knew at Utica. And my wife, I'll never forget, my wife's always been very supportive. And when the job came open, she said, we're going to be going to Utica. I'm like, why? How do you know that? I don't know. She's like, no, this is going to be your chance to be a head coach because they don't come up very often.
Yeah.
And she liked that it was halfway between Albany, with her family's in Albany and my family in Rochester.
Yeah.
And she knew that it's something that, that I wanted to be a head coach. And it was a wild interview process. The president, Todd Hutton, we named we have this huge sports dome that we call the Hut after Dr. Hutton. The athletic director, Jim Spartano, just great people. So I thought I would be interested. And then I met all the people on the interview and then fell in love with the place, which is crazy to me that my first year of coaching was 93. My staff has been teasing me that one of these years I'm going to get to go to the convention for free. Right. I'm like, I don't know if that's a good thing, right? Like that.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm in that group of guys. Like what? And I only missed one convention. I've been a member since 93. I missed my first year as head coach. I missed the Anaheim one. And, because I'm a big convention guy, as the guys know. Like we go rolling in 8, 9, 10 deep, and really, again, but the Coach Butterfield was our priority. Coach Welch, it was our priority. It was amazing to see Coach Welch, be president of the AFCA. I'm like, wow, that's the guy who walked in my high school. He's president of the AFCA.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was tough. Like we're going to play. I think we're getting ready to play Curry in the NCAA tournament in the second round, and I'm driving to Syracuse to meet Coach Spartano to have a cup of coffee on a Monday while we're getting ready for playoffs because he was kind of just seeing, if I was cut out for it. But I guess one thing I could say to younger coaches is like everyone's always watching, right? So like it's so important to like never burn any bridges. And I would never know this until Coach Spartano told me years later. But Coach Spartano, the athletic director, made one call, and I always love telling the story. He's like, all right, he made one call to a head coach, and he called Mike DeLong at Springfield because Mike DeLong is from Holland Patton, which is in Utica area. And I don't know that they're really good friends. And he's like, Mike, I'm going to give you 10 names, and you tell me who the best name is. And Mike DeLong, who recruited me, I visited Springfield. I played against him as a player. I coached against Coach DeLong. Just have a ton of respect for the Springfield coaching tree of guys. Said that I was the guy for the job. And I'm like, what? Like, and if I was an idiot on my visit to Springfield, or if I did something stupid in a game, or, I think if there's the relationships in the game are so important, and you never know who's going to be the one that someone's going to call and ask on a reference. So I'm always appreciative. So my first win, and I say this a little tongue in cheek. So my first game as head coach, we lose to Becker, right? Which is a game we felt that we should have won. The next week we're going to Springfield, which is not easy to play. But Utica had some really good athletes. Compliments to Coach Kemp. We had some really good athletes. So we played some crazy good defense. And my first win was at Springfield.
Wow.
But the first thing Mike DeLong is, he's busting my chops. Where's my Utica club here? And I'm like, what? He's like, well, Coach Kemp would always bring me a case of Utica club from Utica. I'm like, well, he didn't tell me that. I didn't know that. So I'll never forget, Coach DeLong, getting after me for not bringing him his Utica club. But that ended up being my first win as a head coach was at Springfield.
Man, that's what full circle, man. That's awesome. That's an awesome story. Now, your first year, this question is always a little interesting to me too when I talk to head ball coaches. You got your first gig. How did you put your staff together? Who were the guys? Where did you go to?
Yeah, I love it. So I think that's one of the more challenging and probably the best part of my job is putting the staff together, and as the staff changes. And I just think it's too hard a job and you put too many hours in to not love who you're with every day.
Absolutely.
Yep. And if anything, if anyone had a negative, I get too close to them, right? They get too comfortable sometimes because I really truly believe in having that family atmosphere amongst the staff. And there's some great Utica staff stories. I don't know if we have time to tell them all today, but things that we've done in the summertime, from whitewater rafting and going up in the Adirondacks. And I just think it's important to do that with the staff. But so my first day was I think it was Monday, December 17th, if I remember. I interviewed the staff that was there because I felt it was really important that if there were guys that were on the staff that would help me in the transition. And there were a couple of part-time guys, Frank Palmisano, Mike Zigarelli, who's up in heaven, God bless Mike, that were like just these loyal, tough Utica guys, Italian guys, right? That were like ended up being like my crazy guardian angel uncles that looked after me, right? Yeah. And then there was this young grad assistant, Will Pluff, right? That was just a fireball. And like if anyone bled blue and orange, it was this guy, Will Pluff from Buffalo, from Kenmore West. That I'm like, I have to keep this guy, And he actually eventually grew into being the defensive coordinator. And so, so I kind of was the defensive coordinator first, because we only had 3 full-time, myself and 2 full-time. So the hiring, I brought in a couple of Fisher guys, guys that I was comfortable with.
Yeah.
One who's a name that you might recognize, Kurt Fitzpatrick, is currently the head coach at Cortland, which is amazing. Formerly head coach at Morrisville. And he's a Central New York guy. He's from Fulton. And he was the quarterback on our first 10-2 team back at Fisher. And we broke through and went to the NCAA. And so it's been fun to, to look back and, when we have our Utica night at the convention and, Kurt's, I remember Kurt in his interview talking about how he's got a notebook of plays he's been drawing since 6th grade, that he always dreamed to be an offensive coordinator. So, but he was actually my second hire. So the first hire was George Penry, who's another Utica guy. He's from Utica, went to Utica Notre Dame. It's funny. He'll tell you he's from North Utica, Irishman from North Utica. That's another story. And I look like I'm from East Utica. There's a little insight to that. But George had got into the profession. He coached at Heidelberg with Coach Donaldson and some great coaches at Heidelberg. Coached out at Waldorf, and I brought George back to Utica as my O-line coach. So I really felt like if you can either one have alumni on your staff as a head coach or alumni, or excuse me, I just said that twice. Sorry, alumni or guys from the area. Right. I think that's big because part of what you're doing is selling, hey, what's it like to be a Utica guy? But more importantly, what's it like to live in the Mohawk Valley? There was no one to sell Utica better than Coach Penry. George was great. So, the offense really kind of took on, really Fisher's offense, which Fisher's offense kind of evolved from some things from Ithaca that we had, and running power, running gap scheme run, and running the West Coast stuff, which I always loved. The young guys don't like calling it West Coast now. It's, horizontal stretch. It's cooler, right?
Yeah.
I ran cover 3. The cool way to call cover 3 now is vision 3, right? That's what we play now, right? But it's all, a lot of the same stuff in football. But yeah, that was, what's wild is we just had a lot of staff changes just now. I've been busy the last couple of months with the success we had this past season. But, really it's been a joy, being at Utica and being in a community that really cares about all things Utica University now. We were Utica College when I was hired.
Yeah.
And when I tell you that people come out to watch Utica athletics, it's a fun atmosphere to be a part of as a coach and a player.
Well, you said something I thought was awesome. If you go and pour yourself into a place, it's hard to leave. It's hard to leave that place for the next opportunity just because you're so entrenched there. And it sounds like you've been a head coach. You probably make it even harder for guys that want to leave. Just, been so family oriented, creating an environment, knowing that you're working with these guys all day, making sure you enjoy each other's presence. And honestly, I can see the way you're naming what school these guys to, what part of Utica they're from. Like clearly, you know your guys, you know the people that have been around you, and I can appreciate that as a former coach myself. That you have that kind of detail with your staff. Obviously, we had the podcast a couple weeks ago with Bino. Shortly after, by the time we put the podcast out, I think he had just taken a job as the offensive coordinator at Bethune-Cookman. Congrats for him. Never a good time to lose a great guy, right? Former player, somebody that I know you have a ton of respect for. That happens, though, right? It's part of business. What do you immediately do? You know, you lose a coach. You know, what do you do immediately? What do you have to start doing to prepare to fill in that role, especially as important as a coordinator?
Yeah, that, certainly, wasn't surprised. I mean, he had some other interviews, and so it was certainly a name that was out there, with the success that we'd have in as a program, and as an offense. I believe we led in many of the passing categories in the Empire 8, this past year. And, that was what I really kind of sat down and said, okay, what's important first, as we go through this process. I really believe in the process. I know it's very different than like some coaches out there will say, you come make a phone call and you hire a guy. Like I really believe in the interview process. I like bringing guys in, bringing them in for a whole day, and then letting the process kind of reveal who the best person is. But really the first thing that I needed to do was secure my quarterback coach, and who's already now getting some good plug as a bright young coach, but he's only been coaching for a couple months. So our quarterback last year, Braden Zalovich, Braden, great story, is going to be a grad assistant for us.
Good.
Right? So he's going to coach the quarterback. So that was big. And then I kind of had a feeling that I might lose Coach Rubino, and I felt it was really important that I have a coach on my staff with really strong Long Island ties. So this past winter, kind of before all this happened, we were really excited to bring Christian Lujanur on our staff. And Christian is a Bayshore, Long Island, played at Post, played at Cortland, played for Coach Morgan, who's the head coach at Buff State now. Laz is a Utica alum and coached for me and had a lot of success as Alfred's DC. I remember when Coach Ranko called me about Laz when Laz left us as a GA. And so we had our interview process. And what was great about the process was to watch our offensive line coach, Jared Klaus, who's got a great story. And someday you're going to podcast with Jared.
Okay.
Just crush the interview. And undoubtedly needed to be the leader of the offense and showed he could be the leader of the offense. And so what we did is we shifted some things around in the staff after the interview process. And fellow Rochesterian, we call it the Rock, Zeril Hendrick, had shown that he was a dynamite recruiter. So I needed a quarterback coach. These are all things that Joe were great. Joe was a great quarterback coach, a great leader of the offense, and a great recruiter. So I have three different people plugging into those roles. That tells you everything about Joe. Yeah. So Braden coached the quarterbacks, Coach Klaus lead the offense, and Zeril Hendrick was like a dynamite recruiter for us as a GA. Was a All-American at Edinburgh, led the country in interceptions. And I was like, I need to not let this guy go. And so we're also very proud of our diversity at Utica too. So just happy for Zeril in so many ways. So I really changed the whole staff because for so many years it was me and the D coordinator were the two full-time, and then we had two full-time on offense. So we really have only one full-time on offense, which is Coach Klaus. So we're kind of thinking out of the box, shifting the GAs. So we have 3 grad assistants on offense now and 2 on D, and we're rocking and rolling. We're 9 spring practices in, and so I really believed in the process and was really proud of how Jared interviewed. And I think there's been times where I haven't interviewed, and sometimes I look back and say I wish I did, because even if I still went with the same guy, making him go through the process makes him a better coach.
Absolutely, yeah. No question about it. Well, let me ask you this question. This I always find this interesting myself, and I actually don't know if I've ever asked this on a podcast, but obviously the interview process depending on the position, I know it can change. It can depend on your staff that you currently have when you're interviewing somebody. So, but what are some things, not necessarily X and O wise, but as a head coach, you're evaluating this guy up on the board. You're evaluating how he interacts, when he's shaking hands. I'm sure there's just a ton of things that you're just looking at, just evaluating as you have a guy in there. What is, one or two things maybe as a head coach you could pass out to our listeners to kind of be like, hey, when you're at an interview, man, you better draw good circles on the board. I don't know what that little nugget could be. What would you say?
No, I appreciate you asking me that. I think it's been pretty consistent, our interview process. I can remember how our defensive coordinator, Jamie McClendon, responded, that he had never been on an interview like that. And he'd been at, South Florida and Coastal Carolina and UMass. And he'd never been on an interview like we put him through at our place.
Yeah.
It's kind of like our recruiting days, right? It's not just football.
Right.
It's got to be more than football. So, it's a pretty intense. It's from 9 a.m. to 4 or 5 p.m. all day. They're with us. They'll go on a campus tour. And then after their tour, I feel it really important they meet with our athletic director for at least 30 minutes. And then it's funny, when they go to lunch, I have them go to lunch with, 3 of the other head coaches that I'm really close with, on our staff, along with the GAs. And I like getting that feedback, from the other coaches in our department. And the first part of the interview is everything but the X's and O's. We talk to them about their coaching philosophy, their recruiting philosophy, what strengths they have outside of football. Are they stronger with social media? Are they stronger in recruiting? Are they great weight room guy? Trying to find their strengths, and really just get to know them as people. Really, really spend almost a half hour asking them tons of questions about themselves, their family. Again, trying to find a good fit.
Yeah.
And really that's the same thing we do in recruiting, right? When someone decides to come to Utica, they know everything they need to know about, and when they do decide, they're excited about that, right? That there's nothing hidden there.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about it all. We don't just talk about our positives. We talk about our negatives. And then kind of after the lunches, we'll get after the X's and O's. I'm old school, so I want your everyday drills, right? Grab a GA, take us through your everyday drills, whatever position it is, right? Let's get you on the board and draw up, your favorite coverages or your favorite run or pass plays versus coverages, and see how they're on the board. And I do like when they bring a presentation. I think that shows that they prepared, and whatever slideshow that they have. So for full-time positions, we take all day. Maybe a grad assistant, it might be because we may interview more. Sometimes that might be half-day interviews.
Yeah.
But I think it's just so important that they know who we are too. So the interview process, we're going to learn football from them. They're going to learn football from us. They're going to learn what our program's all about. I'm very big on the things that you don't see on the website, right? It's a crazy game. I look back this season, we're on the road against a great Union team. They won the Liberty League the week before. Jeff Berman, become good friends, very excited for him with his new opportunity at John Carroll. We're down 24-7.5. And our football team and program doesn't flinch. And I could just see something special. And we come back and win the game 31-24. I believe that happens because of team chemistry, because of leadership. And so I'm really big on those aspects of the game. Because I tell all the time, hey man, in the NFL, they're all NFL players, right? Division I, they're all scholarship players. What's the difference?
What's the difference? Yeah.
The difference is the coaching staff, and the difference is the locker room and the team chemistry.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah, that's a great point there. Well, I could do this with you all day, Coach. This is.
I know I went over my time. I'm not surprised.
Man, this is awesome, man. I actually had to skip through a few questions, but there is something I want to kind of end it on. You mentioned it earlier. You missed one convention. Your first year as a head ball coach is in the other side of the country. I'm sure you hate you missed that one, but you were a fantastic ambassador for our membership and what we try to do, and man, you embody everything that we're about. So I appreciate you, not just you, but what you do for our coaching community. Obviously, you spoke for us, and you serve on committees, all that kind of stuff. Why is that important to you? Why would for anybody that's not a part of the AFCA, what would you say to encourage them to be a part of it?
it's part of the profession. Like if you're a head coach, in my opinion, you should be at the AFCA convention, and you should support your state high school association, right? So when we go rolling into the convention, there's a lot of Moose logos running around. As many guys as I can bring, and as many young guys that want to sleep on the floor. Yeah, I advanced us from the one bedroom of the Bob Ford days. We get 2 rooms. Now there still might be a lot of guys in there, okay? Yeah. But it's to me, it's that trip. There's so many things that come out of that trip. Now, one I never would see this country. So that's part of my retirement plan with my wife. And she's like, you better take me to Nashville and San Antonio and all these cool places. You got to go to New Orleans. Like I never would have gone to these places if it wasn't for football.
Yeah.
But just the what we learn about each other and the profession when we go, right? And like so many guys go and they don't go to the talks.
Yeah.
And like that bugs me, right? Like go to the talks, meet some guys for lunch, like get the most out of it. I think some guys will say, well, they're not big on the convention. It's all about getting a job. I'm a glass half full guy. I mean, sometimes it is. I interviewed our D coordinator at the convention, but I think if you set a precedent for your young coaches, like if you're a college football coach, you should be part of the association. And then really credit to Todd Berry and the association for all the things, the access now of the information compared to the old days is incredible. Like the old days are some books behind me, like Grant Taft taking all the master coaches talks and putting them into books. If you're a young coach, you have to buy those.
Yeah. Like
you have to. Like that. Now it's all online. Right now you can find that online.
Right.
But we do the same thing with our state coaches association. Like the state clinics there, we're not having a recruiting weekend, and all the high school coaches are there. And so I'm a really big. There's a lot of things. There's the X's and O's we learn. There's the relationships that we have with the high school coaches. I think that's just that's the way it's supposed to be done because that's how I was taught. I was taught by Coach Butterfield. I was taught by Coach Welch. I was taught by Coach Ford. That Coach Ford, another president of the AFCA, 3 of the coaches I was around were past presidents of the association. So this past year to be able to speak was like I was like a little kid. I was beyond blessed to do that. And it's it's a great organization, and I highly recommend coaches go. Find a way to go, raise some money, get them out there. I'll just never forget my first convention I mentioned earlier. And I still have all my notes from all the conventions. And folders. The guy's laughing. I've got these filing cabinets full of notes. Like I have a running back folder and I have a wide receiver folder. But that's an old Bob Ford. He's like, you got to read an article a day and a book a month, and you'll be quite the coach. Like that's what Bob Ford is. So I think maybe to end, like Coach Butterfield said that when I stop learning, I'm going to retire on the lakes. And you always need to learn as a coach in the profession. So I think that's why we go to the convention, because as educators, we want to continue to learn. And the best way is to learn from each other. And I think that's what's great about the profession is a lot of coaches are open to share thoughts and ideas in the game.
Coach, I appreciate you. We need to pencil in a part 2 of this for sure, and definitely need to reconnect with you maybe after next season and then dig into all this other stuff I didn't get to ask you today. But once again, I appreciate you. Thanks again for speaking. Thanks for what you do for the AFCA, and best of luck this fall. And I'll see you in where we at Nashville this upcoming year. Okay.
We'll be there. I will finish every opportunity with Fear the Moose, Mario. Thank you. Really honored to do this, and would love to do a part 2.
Yes, sir. Hey, before I let you go, Coach, I'm so sorry. I always end it like this. If you got a social media account, Twitter account that you love to share, don't want anybody to keep up with your journey, please feel free to share it.
Yeah, no, for the football program, it'd be at Utica_football, and then I'm just at Coach Faggiano. And,
okay.
We'd love to have you guys follow us and see the great things we're doing in the program.
Cool. All right. I almost missed that. We'll share that in the show notes. Have a great one, Coach.
Take care.
All right.